Welcome to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we discuss the history, facts, people, places, events, lots more surrounding Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinside.com. Welcome back. Another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out. hotspringsvillageinside.com, the website. He is Dennis R. Simpson. The other gentleman is Jeffrey Atkins. It's an update on reserve properties, right?
From the usual suspects. Jeff, how are you today, sir?
Doing great, Dennis. How are you and Randy?
Well, we're good. Since we last talked, and by the way, I was looking, and this will be weeks from now that this airs, but when I was looking the other day, we were looking at the reserve property YouTube, and our show on reserve properties has ironically been the #1 show from Hot Springs Village Inside Out. We talked about some of the reserve properties, what's going on. We talked about in that show, we talked about Cortez Beach, what they did with the beach there and what they extended there. We, at that time, as the good book would say, we were discussing with the light we knew. The light we knew was that some things were going in and changing, and things definitely have changed. Jeff, you and I have purchased, how would you describe it? What have we just closed on?
Well, it's 29 acres located at the beautiful corner of Carmona and Barcelona, the North Barcelona.
And Cortez, kind of.
And Cortez, kind of. It's 29 acres. It's got a little bit of slope. It has some good flatter areas in it. And we bought that to hold for investment or potential development. And we don't know yet what we're going to do with it. But we just thought we'd get our foot on the door, in the door. And we had, I guess, some running around money to buy this from Cooper. And we just closed on it as we're recording this a few days ago. So,
well, and let's go through the process just to have this conversation. We talked about what happened, how they bring it in and whatever. What we found was, as we purchased our own reserve property, was that as reserve property, it had never been surveyed, right?
Well, at least if it had been surveyed, they wanted to update the survey, but there was a new survey, a full survey done, and Cooper is the one that wanted this done, and I think it was needed for the title work as well. So, and it was not a cheap thing that had to be done.
Not at all.
But, we saw the cost. And then there's a supplemental declaration that actually brought the property into the village. That was our choice. I think we discussed that on the original video, how you could have the choice of bringing something in or not bringing it in once it was no longer reserve property. And we also cited where as far as we knew, there'd only been one property that had been sold that had not been brought into the village, and that was off of Cortez Road on the very edge of the village.
Does that declaration have to be made when you close on the property?
Yeah, it's part of the closing. There's a supplemental declaration, and I could reach back behind me probably and find it real quick and shine it up at
the same. Does the same go for residential versus commercial?
There would need to be a supplemental declaration, I believe, for each.
And all that has to happen at closing.
I would think you would want to do it concurrent with closing, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
And let's be specific.
Getting your deed.
Yeah.
And let's be specific. We chose to bring it in as commercial, but we could have brought it in as residential. So hypothetically, Randy, it's a 29 plus nearly 30 acre lot. You could have bought a residential property. I mean, you could have brought a reserve property, brought it in as residential, and you would have had one 30-acre lot-ish with one POA due. And you could simply do that as you wish. Now, as commercial, we may divide it up into other things, or we don't know. We literally don't know. I believe this is the first time, Jeffrey, you and I bought something and we really don't know what we're going to do with it,
Right.
Well, so I was going to touch, you're pulling up that file, Ellen. Let me go to other properties real quick. Since we've last talked, we know that there's a proposed spa at the main entrance of DeMonte, where you come into the gates, and there's a clubhouse there, a guardhouse, I should say. And on either side of that road and on the eastern side of the road, there's several acres there. And did Jeff, in the paper, did they say how many spa units there was going to be there or whatever? And I had heard, and I don't know, but I had heard it was fractional ownership, which, what is that?
Well, fractional ownership is just where you have more than one owner. There was something like that proposed by Brent Gray years ago over by Granada Golf Course, and the POA board was all on a tizzy about it. But, what difference does it make who owns the property? So I didn't hear about the fractional ownership. I don't think it was that many units. It was not huge, but I don't remember the exact number.
Well, and as I understand, also we've got it looks like it's coming to fruition. I've talked to Jeff about it, Jeff Hollingsworth, about this, and not gotten a firm. He says he wants to come on the show and talk with us soon, but apparently there's going to be an 18 hotel room complex across from Pizarro and DeSoto, right in that area. And as I'm understanding it, apparently it's going to be all digital. It's not going to have a front check-in desk like a regular hotel or something like that. It's basically just 18 hotel rooms that you can individually check into, kind of a smart hotel. That's what it sounds like. Jeff, any history on that or any details?
No, I mean, there's never been anything like that in the village or the spa. So it's new ground. It's going to be interesting to see. And of course, how it's implemented is the most important part. But, if you don't have a big hotel lobby, you don't have the eyesore maybe part of a hotel. It's cottages, or it's a couple of buildings that look nice. And if they do it right, it'll look great. And you might not even notice, it's that sort of thing that you might not even notice, even though it's right there on DeSoto Boulevard, if it blends well with the rest of the village.
And we'll link up the Village Voice article, but the Village Voice article, I'm looking at it just so that according to that report, it's 5.71 acres for the lodge, and then on the other side is 3.25 acres for the spa and whatever else. 14 buildings on wooded acres, a small conference center, meeting rooms, spa, the whole bit. But as far as the residential ownership options, will be available in 10-week fractional increments for deluxe double 2-bedroom, 2-bath luxury suites. It does not say how many.
And I don't want to jump ahead. A lot of people have equated fractional ownership with timeshare, and it may be. I don't know. I don't know. But 10 weeks is kind of an interesting spin. And Jeff, and that's Randy, you're referring back to the spa, and that's exactly correct. Jeff, the 18 unit hotel that we're talking about down the way, that'll be like a smart hotel that apparently won't have a lobby or anything. How will they pay per unit or per room how does the POA, how will they assess dues, or do they?
That's, I really can't say for sure. Typically it'd be one assessment per unit, but it's one piece of commercial property as well. Like when you have say where the Remax building is, there's all those other offices there. Is that one plat of land that has one assessment? Is it 10 plats of land that have 10 assessments? Does it really matter that one building has two, like it has the dentist office and it has something else in it? Well, actually, the dentist office is a whole building by itself. But say where Artfully Brewed has several other businesses that are in that same building. Well, that's probably just one assessment at most, because it's one legal plat. Now, I don't know exactly how that's platted, but another good example is over by the quarry, the commercial area over by the quarry. There's all those metal buildings there, and there's different parcels of land, and I suspect that each parcel of land is what is the assessment is based on, not the buildings that are on the land.
Well, we haven't talked about it, and it's been contemporaneous. But what about, isn't that near the archery center? Is that where you're talking about?
Yeah.
Because they've opened the archery center, and I haven't even been out to take a look at it or anything.
Yeah, we used to call that the quarry. I don't know if it's still referred to, but that's back where they did the burning of the trees after the tornado. It's there's self-storage there. There's office buildings there, commercial buildings there, like auto repair places, that sort of things.
Kind of a gravel pit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably based on the parcels would be my guess, but I do not know for sure.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that reserve property in the last year, that it's dramatically shrinking as Cooper is selling these properties? Or, I mean, how significant has the sell-off of reserve properties been in the last year?
Well, I don't think we're privy to everything. I mean, we see what we see by looking at public records or hearing about. So we don't know everything potentially that's been sold. There could have been other parcels that we don't know about or we haven't been aware of, or haven't been announced. Because like our 29 acres, how would you know if we hadn't told you?
Yeah, good point.
You wouldn't.
Right.
Unless you just sat there and watched transactions go through.
Is it a fair assumption, though, that Cooper is pretty intent in
it looks like they're pretty
their
intent.
holdings?
Yeah, it looks like they're pretty intent on either raising cash or reducing their holdings or both. That may accelerate towards the end, or it may tail off as all the good stuff gets picked out. Who knows? I mean, they have some really, as we pointed out on that previous video, they have some really small parcels that aren't good for very much. And, do they end up giving those to the POA and making them common property or something?
Yeah, there are several properties that are like acre and a quarter or something like that are kind of orphans. I mean, Jeff, we were talking about the one over on Segovia that backs up to the road, and you kind of look at that and you go, what exactly would you do with that? And it might make a walking trail better, but I don't think you could put a house on it. I mean, maybe you could, I don't know, but it's a very interesting spin, that's for sure. And I'll tell you what, I personally think, and Randy, kind of to your point, I think this is going to be a developing story for the next year. I think we're going to, as things sell and there's more that's up for sale. And it's funny, Jeff, I see the properties as we go, but it doesn't look like it's listed on the MLS like usual, is it?
Well, the one we bought was, and we got a link from the realtor, and the last I looked, there were other parcels available. Not all the parcels they have were on that listing, but there were a number, maybe 15 of different parcels spread out all over the village, in places you wouldn't think I wouldn't think that was reserved property. They used to have those big maps and they showed reserved property, and we just kind of took that as, okay, this is the reserved property, but there were smaller parcels that were not on those maps. And
a lot of them.
And there were a lot of them. I mean, there's one right on the number 1 green at Balboa Golf Course.
What?
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's right there at the corner.
It's right there on the corner. First thing off the corner off of Balearic Road, right there on the number 1 green. So if you would like a nice 1 acre lot on Balboa number 1 green, go for it. And then
probably only take 15 to 20 gravel trucks of gravel to get it back up, because it is a little low right there.
It is a little low, but I checked it out. It's
low.
It's the worst part is common property. The actual where the lot is not bad itself. And then right across the street from that, between that street and Danville Road, there's another reserve property.
That's 15 acres or so there, isn't it?
Yeah. And then right across Danville Road on either side of Balearic, there's reserved property. And so it's all through the village.
Look at Randy. He's been looking at the maps too.
Studying. Well,
he knows where 15 acres is.
Every time you do a screen share, I'm like, I'm lost. So I'm tired of being lost. So I decided I'd study up. It is curious. It makes you wonder why they picked what they picked to hold as reserve property.
Well,
not that we'll ever know, but I mean, it seems so random.
Yeah. Well, and to use the term, and I've used this before, the area between where Trademark is right now, basically between Minorca and Balboa Road, pardon the term, but I've more than one time called that the stretch marks of the village, because at that time they were growing so quickly and building stuff so quickly.
Yeah.
They jumped over some places. And Jeff, we talked about this. There's some great lots in that Pamplona and all that subdivision area there between Minorca and Balboa. There's some great home sites in there. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, isn't that where there's 1,000 square foot minimum? So if you wanted to build a tiny home, a real home, not a trailer, you could put something smaller there. But the reason I say that is because that's one of those areas, Randy, like just the Balboa corner we were talking about there. I suspect, look at the ashtray behind you. That was going to be called Ponce Golf Course, and then they changed it to Balboa, and then they built Ponce on the north side. And, there was a lot of flux and movement. And I imagine these were places that they just kind of skipped over, like, okay, we'll just reserve that for now. We may come back and make a tennis court there or something, and they just never came back to it. As a matter of fact, yeah, there you go.
All right, for the audio, and for the audio only audience, describe what I'm showing here.
Randy is holding up an ashtray that I think is one of the funniest ashtrays in the village. It has is this the one with every lot? No. This is just the one basically from Lake Coronado back west. And in the southeast corner of that, looks perfect, Randy. It shows up great. There's just a big gray area. It says reserved for future property. And it calls what's now the Balboa Golf Course, the Ponce Golf Course. So things change. I mean, it just changes. You just don't know how it's going to work out. For example, one of my deals, and I hope this happens someday, the gravel pit you were talking about there, Jeff, the quarry, not far from there is Equestre. Well, they called it Equestre because they talked about having a horse center there, an equestrian center there. Didn't work out. May still someday. We never know.
Well, David Twiggs.
Well, I'll tell you what, we wanted to cover. I'm sorry, Jeff.
David Twiggs wanted to put an equestrian center back there.
Really, right there?
Back in 2011 or 12, I guess 12 and 13. Yeah.
Is that far from that is kind of a ways from the archery center though, right? It's not the same one.
No, it's not the same place.
Okay.
Well, it could, actually, it may be, Dennis. I think you're right. It may be.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to let you know that we will be following up on reserve properties. Thanks for tuning in again. That was one of our biggest episodes. Jeffrey, thank you for joining with us again. For Hot Springs Village Inside Out, and for Dennis Simpson and Mr.
Randy Cantrell. And
Jeff Atkins. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com, and tell a friend.